ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, can everybody see my slide deck? Okay, excellent. I'll go ahead and jump right in then. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad that you could join us today. Before we begin, I would like to take just a few minutes to talk about iDigBio and the work we still have going on. As many of you know, iDigBio will officially conclude in 2026. For the past 15 years, iDigBio has had an incredible impact supporting research, collaboration, and innovation on a national scale. This is not a moment for sadness, but one of transition. We're proud to pass the torch to the broader community, confident that the mission of advancing biodiversity, digitization, and discovery will continue in capable hands. So before we dive into today's presentation, let me give you a quick overview of who we are, what our mission has been, and the exciting work still happening. iDigBio began 15 years ago with the support of the National Science Foundation and the vision of its founding leaders. Over that time, we've made tremendous strides together as a community, and our shared efforts have helped shape the future of biodiversity research. At its heart, iDigBio works to make biodiversity specimen data widely available and useful through digitization, training, open access, and creative new applications. And while iDigBio as a project will eventually close, our mission and the data the community has generated will live on. Thanks to contributions from more than 1,000 biodiversity collections across 350 institutions in the US, the iDigBio portal now hosts nearly 150 million specimen records and 65 million media files from over 2,000 datasets. These data will remain available long after iDigBio continuing to serve researchers, educators, students, and the public. And we're not done yet. As we move forward towards the conclusion of the project, we still have some new initiatives on the horizon. One of these new initiatives is this webinar series, which highlights protocols, practices, and strategies to ensure the long-term contribution of collections, digitization, and data mobilization. The collections community is well positioned to sustain the impact, to sustain this important work, and we're excited to support this transition. As we look towards sustaining the momentum of collections digitization beyond iDigBio, today's webinar offers a perfect example of how institutions can think creatively about the future. Our next presenter, Alyson Wilkins, Collection Digitization Coordinator at the Natural History Museum of Utah, will share how strategic planning and flexibility have been key to helping digitization products thrive at smaller institutions. She'll discuss how structuring projects to be both organized and modular has made them more sustainable, as well as lessons learned from integrating workflows with digital asset management systems. Alyson will also highlight how students, volunteers, and citizen scientists have played an important role through effective training and engagement. Now, before I hand things over to Alyson, I'll just do a quick reminder. As with other iDigBio webinars, the chat and mic functions will be disabled. Please post your questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many as time allows after the presentation. Thank you so much for your understanding. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand things over to Alyson to start today's session. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Awesome, thanks, Shyla. Now I've got to pull off my own sharing feed. Give me just 1 second. Sorry, if I share while I'm waiting for my presentation to come up, it doesn't let me see Zoom. So you guys are getting a weird tour of the presenter view. All right, so hello again, everyone. Thank you all for coming. And apologies in advance, this is gonna be a little cheesy, but you just have to roll with it. It's also not going to be super formal. I'm myself not a super formal person. And so, as Shyla said awesomely earlier, this is going to be talking about some of the weird stuff that I get into behind the scenes. And if you work with me, I am sorry in advance. Please correct me if I missay anything in our timelines. So, to start off, if I can get this to go. just checking in with everybody. This is where the cheesy bit comes in. It's been a hard time for museums, especially now more than ever, and it's been a hard time for everybody. So I'm just checking in, making sure, I empathize. We're all going through a lot, but we're here today together to learn, to grow, uh, and to have some fun with pictures. So in the beginning, uh, the museum moved, basically. This is way before I started here in about 2018, 2019. So our building moved from on campus, an old vintage building, to our brand new building that I'll show you a picture of later because I have to brag, it's a really cool building. And about 2015, there was either a desire or an initiative put forth from the university and from internal staff to do two major things. One is to create a digitization strategy, a strategy for archiving and dams, and like, how are we going to handle this transition into this new digital age? The second thing, which has never come to fruition yet, hopefully, would be, I think, a biobank. All right, and then in 2018, which shows you the timeline of how universities work, the first staff was hired, and that was myself to handle, basically, I do all the digital stuff for the research half of the museum. So anything in our 5 major divisions, which are botany, which includes mycology, botany, which includes mycology, mammals or vertebrates, invertebrates, fossils, and anthropology, with various smaller collections sprinkled throughout. And in 2019, we hired our official dams manager, who also manages sort of the archiving metadata association for the rest of the museum. And let me tell you, I am eternally grateful I do not have her job. That seems rough. And then right now we're moving towards this future. Things have progressed, things have changed. The museum has gone through leadership changes, pandemics, and things like that. And to distract from all that negative list of things that are changes, as we change even further into the future, here's a cool picture of our museum. The old one is on the left, the new one is on the right. Plenty of my colleagues have great photos from that time that they moved the museum, and if you ever are in the same Zoom room as them, I recommend asking them. It's hilarious pictures of everything. So in the beginning, we started out with what do we need and what do we have? And so the big question that sort of kicked us all off, to my understanding, is if the building was on fire, what would we save? And that looked different for everyone. So for our mammals collections manager at the time, it was we need to do something with our documents, our field notes, our catalogs, all these really interesting things that have important information, from trait data to environmental data to collector data. Like, we would need that if something happened. Whereas for others, it was like, hey, I need a visual record of what this basket looked like at this time. Or we have all this other media that has been sort of gathering dust in the background that we need to figure out what to do with it. And so within this larger, they called it an initiative, there was sort of a plan for a singular student or grad student, because the universities, if you work for a university, they love to say they've been supporting students in their academic endeavors. It was in the plan for one student to work with one of the major 5 divisions for about 20 hours per week. And then, as I said earlier, one person to work within collections, one person to handle everything else. Every collection had its own plan. I've got the document somewhere. It's really interesting to look at. We had 3 cameras in about 2 different locations that were at the time about 3 years old. Some things were being shared via a database, some things weren't. Some things are in collections management databases, some things aren't. Everything is different, and as you know, nothing goes according to plan. If it does, I want to talk to you because I've got questions. So yeah, but didn't work. If you've ever employed an undergraduate student, it is very, very difficult for them to schedule a full 20 hours per week for the academic school year. And so the decision was made super early on to split those 5 individual positions into 10 different positions, so about 2 students per collections division. And that has changed and fluctuated over the years where somebody's like, hey, like I don't want to train students, I don't have the capacity, or hey, we need this student needs 15 hours and they say they can pull it off. Let's see if they can do it. And it really is sort of a case by case person with this larger framework of, hey, there are these tasks that we need this student to do. A key component I found of working on these sort of larger digital projects, other than having some sort of initial framework and like, series of reassessments over the years, is, sometimes things have to change and staff change. And from the initial plan, there wasn't really a firm idea of how to get material from that we were creating into the dams. Mostly that was because we didn't really know what dam system we were using. And as I will talk later, our dam system is really, really weird. That and, the initial priorities, some get accomplished really quickly and some get changed as staff changes. So yeah, changing students and student roles. So over the, what year is it? About 6 or 7 years that I have been working for the museum, we've had, from our initial first group of 7 undergraduate and 8 graduate students, we've had about 35, 40. Some that are more successful than others, some that went on to great, brilliant academic careers, and some that, decided maybe this isn't what I want to do with my life. But they've all had a very vast impact on the kinds of things that we've put out, or they've had contributions that have shaped the collections in really interesting ways. Our one graduate student in the beginning is a great example of that. He was a specialist in Hawaiian and Polynesian history, and so we put him on our Hawaiian and Polynesian collection that later went on to be part of his research and his graduate thesis, is how Utah has a growing and changing Polynesian community and how is that reflected historically. He was an interesting dude. And I've learned a lot working with these students and how to manage students. Because more often than not, at least in my experience, when you get put in charge of a project, you're not given a lot of training on how to manage people. And so a lot of it has been working with the students on an individual basis per collection and looking at the priorities we have to have and deciding what works best for them. And this is still changing because, people are people and people will be different. Some students wanted really diverse tasks. They wanted to learn something, they wanted to research, and some wanted to engage with it. And some are just like, hey, like I just I'm here to get the job done, get paid my, I think $15 an hour is what the rate is at now, and then just, call it quits at the end of the day and peace out. And then some, wanted to work independently by themselves on a flexible schedule, because they have weird class hours. But some are like, hey, I'm feeling a little isolated here. Can you like help connect me with another student in this role so that I can become friends or frenemies in some cases? And so as part of my eventual written plan that I'm working on, which I will talk more about later, it's a lot of reassessing what students want every year. The university, as of last time I asked, that we work for as part of the University of Utah, does not have a formal performance management assessment plan for student or staff employees. And so integrating that as part of the workflow and seeing how they are doing and engaging with both each other and the projects is important, although sometimes you have to be real with them and say like, hey, like I know this task is, boring as dirt, which is actually pretty interesting, but it needs to be done in this way. What can help you engage more with, typing in data entry for 5,000 grasses? So bad plans are really kind of nebulous. But there are some elements that I know now that made it really difficult to move forward from that initial plan. The initial plan had very strict goals saying we want 5,000 of this, 5,000 of this. We want this done in this set period of time. It didn't really account for us getting new things. We get a lot of new things. I think our registrar is lurking somewhere in this webinar, but you can ask her about how many new things that we get per year, and it's a quantity of things. But also what I didn't account for is retraining students over and over again on the same task, especially as technology changes and gets better and new data is formatted, new things are getting in. How do we keep training students to do the same tasks? And this is something I'm still kind of grappling with as the person who trains students on some of these is if everybody learns differently and students are different people, how do we make our trainings comprehensible to a wide variety? And what do we do about stuff that's been in our system forever and ever that we may or may not know what it is? Especially material that relates to collections, but may be kind of nebulous. Like we are installing these objects in the new museum. What do we do with that material? What do we do with all this field material? That kind of thing. And so plans adjust and change. And the big aspect of that, is what do we do with this data? How do we get it in our system? So if you rewind in your brain to earlier in my presentation, I talked a lot about our DAMs, our digital asset management system, which we didn't have in the beginning. It was about a year between my being hired and my colleague being hired who was spearheading the transition into the DAMs. There's a lot of great things about our dams, and there are lots of problems with our dams. So our dams is a homegrown system run through our University of Utah Marriott Library systems. So it's a conglomeration of several different components. It's an archives component, and it's a sharing component, and it's a data processing and data entry bit as well. And so because the system is built for the libraries, it's really nice because it allows our material, which is related to the library's material, to be searched through one cohesive search portal. So if you wanted to look at everything that the university did, or this person who is employed at the university in like the 60s, that is a feasible thing you can do, provided you have the right metadata. But library metadata doesn't always quite mesh correctly with some of the data standards that scientists employ and actively use. Our DAMS does not connect easily with any database system. It does connect fairly easily with Symbiota, with some complications in how we get it back and forth and in the system and shared. But it is a public searchable interface with some material that's held back that is not allowed to be shared with the wider public. It makes you think a lot about or it made me think a lot about how we assign metadata in between these different systems, transitioning from the DAMs, the libraries interface, and the archives interface to what we put in our collections management system and towards what we share through iDigBio and GBIF and all these other different data aggregators. And it made me ask the question to our collections managers is, hey, how our dams shouldn't be our system. So how do you want people to find stuff within our dams? It shouldn't be EMU. It shouldn't be ecdysis. What would make this easier for somebody who's a novice to search? And that's still an ongoing conversation we have as we try to get more of our administration and marketing to use it, and as more people look and engage with collections material. But it has been widely popular. We've gotten several million hits across our different portals as we've been putting more stuff up, adding more metadata, making it more comprehensive and connected towards the others. My next step is to collate the DAMS data that we put in with how the libraries share data better to share via archives portals, things like finding aids and things like that. And to encourage or scare you, here's our crosswalking for our DAMS material. As you can see, our different EMU fields may map to several or more than one of our DAMS metadata fields as they get shared and compiled and composited. So it's a lot of spreadsheets, like a serious number of spreadsheets that may or may not always work cohesively. So this is an example from one of our ethnographic objects. So you can see catalog number can be put in identifier, but also in source, because you may need to like cross-link things. Our makes it easier for me to sort things, but not for our collections manager to edit things. Or 5 or 6 fields may be a keyword, or they may be a subject. Or somebody be like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z field. But eventually, after much, much effort, you can get something that's mostly searchable with information that is relevant. So this is a great example of one of our Katsina, of a collection I recently put on from our ethnographic collections and different ways we've formatted, and I'm working towards automating the data as it gets into the dams and then cross-linking it back into emu, which I would have included a slide of, only I crashed emu last time I tried to like open it and get it to do a thing. So everything is sort of an iterative work in progress. So bask in its glory. And so we've got our dams, we've got our vague plan, but there are still some sticklers and materials that make planning difficult unless you allow for some sort of flexibility as you move forward, because priorities change, people change, lots of things happen that are unexpected or you only get told of at last minutes. And so planning for the future, there are some collections with serious quantity of material that we are still working on automating more, but we can do in scale and in quantity, and I would love to tell you more about it, but we don't have time to talk about every archaeological or entomological like data processing thing. Our biggest problems with archaeology, entomology, and our vertebrates collection is the sheer number of quantity of things our awesome scientists keep collecting and the kinds of data we can harvest from legacy material. But my passion project as a person is creating collections that are searchable both in the database and online of our minerals, our leeches, our trace fossil collections, and of our own museum history. Let's see. So my personal pet project is our minerals collection. We have an awesome minerals collection. It's about 8,000 to 12-ish thousand minerals. When we moved in from that old building to that shiny new building, the minerals collection hall was kind of a bit of an afterthought, which is strange because it is a really popular and stunning collection. And so you've got a popular collection that was condensed down into a really small area, so less of it is out. But it's never really been fully inventoried from when I was digitizing. As I learned when I was digitizing records, I think the last time a full attempt was made to inventory/assess the collection in the 90s, they only got about a third of the way through before they ran out of time. So that means the database in the data is spotty for this old and fabulous collection. And if any of you have ever tried to photograph a really cool rock that's very shiny, it is very hard and very tricky. And so I spent a lot of time researching, trying to figure out and draft policy for how can we better photograph and share our very fascinating minerals collection. And that led me down some really weird rabbit holes on Mindat and all these other places that we share minerals data, because minerals aren't currently shared through GBIF or iDigBio yet. Someday in the future, hopefully. But we do have sort of a precursor from our original database system in our current emu database system. So yeah, so how do museums photograph and share minerals data? If you have a minerals collection and would like to tell me how you share data and photograph minerals, please reach out. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation. But through the course of my research, I found this great guy whose name I had written down and then lost, who does a lot of really nice mineral photography for some of these really big institutions. And I'm like, hey, like, I really like this stand. Can I figure it out? So I literally printed out a screenshot of like a frame in the video and took it to like one of our exhibits departments meetings. And I'm like, hey, can you make this for me? Because I can't afford a really nice stand at the moment due to budgeting nonsense. And so they're like, yeah, like, give me a second to figure it out. You'll need to find the glass on your own. So I went to 4 or 5 different hardware stores before I found one that cut glass. Because I would call and ask, and they say, "Oh, we don't have that. Try X, Y, and Z," and so on and so on. And then trying to find different things to balance light reflectance and these different things, and it's still workflow and process, but it's coming together to make some really interesting photos of rocks and minerals. Still slow, it's still cumbersome. Still trying to figure out the data issue. I am entirely serious. If you know of a good way to split and share mineral data and what's important, please let me know. So check back with me on our minerals workflow at a future date. So mass imaging mammals. So shout out to any of y'all doing ranges out there. She's a great project, digitizing trait data for mammals. Super great. And so a while back, one collection manager ago in our vertebrates collection, I was like, hey, we finished this first project, which was great. I would like to photograph mammals. And they were like, oh, cool. Nobody really looks at skins, but you figure it out. But we would like the data on the tags. So I'm like, what's a good way to get data off the tags? And I stole this from our previous collections manager. So if she's in the room, sorry. So I'm like, all right, what's an easy way to do this? We've got an imaging station. I don't want to do this one by one because it's a lot of mammals to photograph one by one. Let's figure out a way to automate it. So I'm like, okay, what if we did a grid? We laid out an even, consistent grid for things of a similar size because a good chunk of our collection is rodents. That's what happens when you get a lot of rodent specialists over the years, lots of teeny tiny small things in very similar sizes. And so I'm like, okay, let's try this out. I go to I try Image Magic, or not Image Magic. There's a software that the British Natural History Museum developed, InSelect. And so I tried that, running it through. It worked great. It was a good start onto what I wanted to do, which is sort of automate and rename and process these photos in mass. So I worked with one of our IT staff who was part-time at the time, who was really into software development. He's like, all right, give me a bit. I can figure it out. And so I give him a bit, he figures it out. I break it immediately. He fixes it again. I break it, and then we realize part of the problem is Python isn't installed on my computer. I feel really bad for our IT guys. But eventually we figure it out, and we get it towards this image on the far right, which is top and bottom automatically renamed with a specimen number where you can see the tags and the specimens. So I'm like, all right, stage 1 done. I can photograph everything in the collections. So how do we get the data from the collections? So building off previous project that we did, transcribing field notes for trait data, like what if we do something similar in using the same template? So if we give it a shot and we get through about 15,000 specimens in the period of several months, people were transcribing things at a rate faster than we could upload them, which is the best problem to have. But the problem we didn't account for is, all right, so these fields that we want to pull aren't built into our citizen science platform. What do we do? How do we get it from point A to point B, like getting it in Arctos and not duplicating it? And so we worked with another collaborator who built a script that I'm still trying to figure out. I need to bug our previous collections manager about is, all right, let's start getting all this stuff into Arctos and into the dams and linked up. So some of it's still a work in progress, but we have officially photographed all of our mammals, which is great, awesome. Now my next step is getting those all in the system and into Arctos, and birds. I have one lovely, enthusiastic student who is very into birds. But you can see from the screen, our transcription project for tags was very successful. We had about 600 volunteers transcribe almost all of our mammals. I have to revisit the bats because bats have weird measurements that I did not account for because I'm not a mammologist, but great. If you would like more information for this, I've got all of the materials written up and would more than love to share it with you. We need some stress testers. Other than me, I'm a very stressed data tester. So really transitioning because I forgot to put in a transition slide is bugs. So we have over the course of the last several years gotten a lot of Lepidoptera. So butterflies, moths. And so there are two major situations that I eventually talked our collections manager into letting me help her transcribe all that data really, really quickly. So one section of the collection was Riker mounts. So if you've never seen a Riker mount, that's it in the lower right. But we got about 83, now 84 of those. She just found one, all with about 1,000 different butterflies and moths from all over the world. And so the first stage when she got them is, okay, would it be worth it trying to open it and repin it to make it part of the collection? She's like, no, that's too hazardous, and this way they can be handled and looked at. So I'm like, okay, well, what can we do rather than have one person type all this data into our ecdysis instance? Like, what can we do? So I'm like, well, can I try flatbed scanning them? It worked for when I flatbed scanned leeches, which is a different story. And so we began our test with just putting the Riker mount directly on our scanner bed, which is one of these handy Epson scanners scanning at 100 to 300 DPI, which wasn't enough. You need a higher dots per inch ratio of like 600 to 1,000 to get a really nice picture of a moth, like this one we have here, which you can zoom in pretty well. And then you can split it within the Epson software or within different systems. One thing, if you would like to try this or something similar, is try different adhesives. Not all the labels stuck on precisely, but using this and the citizen science portal that we used in our mammals example, we managed to transcribe and get into the system almost all of these Riker mounts of butterflies, which is great. They're really great. It's all from one gentleman as well. And so now came the second problem of this huge collection that we got of butterflies is there are several thousand of these butterflies. Entering them in one by one would take a while, but it also seems kind of like a waste of science to have it sort of lingering in the background. And I don't know if you've ever tried to photograph an insect, it can be pretty tricky. So I'm like, let's try. I turned to our volunteer, now student employee. You'll see in the next slide, I'm like, all right, what do you want to try so that we can figure it out? And so she'd been working with me on a previous project, photographing the mammals, where we worked with the modular square system. And it worked okay, but bugs come in a lot of different sizes, especially Lepidoptera. So making a modular square one didn't really work quite as efficiently as we liked. And so we're like, all right, what else can we try? So we just in paleontology gotten one of those automated photograph lazy Susans to sort of circle round and round to help us 3D model fossils. Well, I'm like, what if we try something like this and divide it into like a pie kind of thing and figure it out? And so she helped me test it out with like, doing very quick one-shot images of things like butterflies, but also doing stacked images of things like snake flies and other fun, weirdly shaped insects. And it did work pretty well. And I would like to note this is still a work in progress. This is my lovely student or my volunteer who is now a student. And so at the time she was a singular volunteer. She would do anywhere from 200 to 500 specimens, give or take, during her shift over the course of a week. She's an absolute photograph wizard and has helped sort of test the process to figure out some of the constraints of the system. And the biggest constraint is our stand is of a limited height. And so we would need a bigger stand if we wanted to do a variety of things. And then we were left with all these images to put into Digital. I'm like, all right, looking at Digital, which is run by the Atlas of Living Australia, which is our primary citizen science platform. And this is our platform because this is just what we've always been using, and it makes more sense to keep it all in one sort of site. There weren't a lot of insect projects. So I'm like, all right, maybe this will be popular surely because there aren't a lot of insects. And so I uploaded the first 50 and they were done in like the next day. And so I'm like, all right, let's put out more. So I took a chunk of the stuff that she had been doing and just put it all online at once in just larger chunks. And they were all done in about a month, about 450 a month. And so more often than not, our rate of transcription and validation outpaces the rate that we can photograph insects, especially since she is a pretty busy person. And so we're like, okay, this is great. We need to figure out what is the sort of the capacity we can meet to better plan out our projects. So that way I can say, hey, like at the end of the week, I'll upload 100, or at the end of 2 weeks, I'll upload 200. And so first we needed to figure out the capacity of what my student can do. And so she can do a singular specimen stacked with the label and text image and a scale bar in about 1 to 2 minutes, as opposed to our previous procedures, which took about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm like, great. So if you're here, the X amount of time, we can do this amount of specimens. And so we've been slowly working out as we've changed size grades, like here's what you can do with this versus this, and then working around her schedule. We've done about 2,000-ish images of primarily Lepidoptera, but moths, phasmids, stick bugs, all sorts of other things have been transcribed, validated, and imported into our ecdysis instance, which you are more than welcome to check out. Some have been more successful than others. Like I said, like part of my process and part of the flexibility I've had to built in for myself as I work with all the collections is, sometimes things don't work out, and that's okay. We can reassess and adjust as we progress in the project. And so now these are ready to be added into our digital asset management system and re-imported back into ecdysis as we figure out some sort of kinks in thumbnail generation. And so moving forward, we need to plan a digital strategy and adjust our digital strategy. And what I really need to do is write all of this down just in case, something happens. And so we're working towards a unified naming structure for files that is constrained by what sort of special characters our digital asset management systems and collections management systems accept. They both accept different special characters like asterisks and things like that differently. All of our files need to get into the DAMs, which I thought would be easier than it is. But it is a work in progress and we're figuring it out. All of our requests for media of both collections managers and myself go through a Microsoft form, and that's how we track it and say, hey, y'all from marketing keep requesting the same things. Do not keep track of your 50th photo of this piece of quartz, or put your collections, catalog number like I asked you to. We need to work out what the museum-wide commitment to a long-term digital strategy looks like. So our DAMS is great-ish for collections and research. It didn't quite work out for the rest of the museum, much to my chagrin. And so we need to kind of figure out, okay, well, our DAMS didn't work for this, so am I in charge of this DAMS and there's a different DAMS for everyone else? What can we do to sort of make this a more cohesive plan? As collections and research, because they're awesome, bought into it, figured it out, did the best they could within their capacity. Everybody else is still sort of in the figuring it out and find out phase. But we also need to build in a plan for backups and data changing, which we had to do when our system was under malicious attack earlier, in December of last year. We had to figure out, what do we do if something happens and we can't access all this data or all this data? Everything changes, including the internet. And so, yeah, moving forward, this is my personal to-do list, which tells you I really need to write and update our plan and figure out how we share this with the community, get this done, how we're updating and changing towards database versions and data aggregator versions and data changes and things like that. What do we do to adjust and do this? And what have I done to make data processing better for me that I haven't shown the collections managers yet, because some are more tech savvy than others. I need to backtrack and update records that I created in the very beginning because our plans have changed a lot. I need to get more material online and data cleaned. I have found caches of photos that I put on servers that I need to update and add. But like I said, the data has changed, the process has changed. How can I take my own legacy material and put it into the system to make it accessible? We also need to create a plan for what happens when data is corrupted in the process of waiting to get uploaded, or legacy data has been corrupted, or information has been lost, and sort of creating a plan for reassessing sort of found in digital collections material, and if we really need to retain all of this for the long term, or if some of the stuff can be put off to the wayside and um, you know, forgotten forever and ever. But I'm gonna leave you guys with some questions. And if you'd like to brainstorm, please let me know. Is things that maybe we need to consider to be more flexible is, especially as a smaller institution or a bigger institution, is what do we happen to do, or what plans do we have in place for when technology breaks or changes or becomes outdated? What do we do when staff and staff priorities change? How do we adjust when we're full throttle in one project, photographing sunflowers, but then that person leaves or vanishes into the ether, and now we get a person whose sole focus in life is photographing ferns? Like, do we keep one going, or do we stop? Do we transition into just doing ferns? And then, plans for digital growth and sharing as our institutions change, as funding for these data aggregators change, as data standards change. Like, how how do we do that? And last but not least, a reminder that, we aren't really alone. We're in it together. We're in it for life. Once you leave a museum, you're still part of the museum family. And I really forgot to review my slides. I apologize. I thought I had these in better order than I did. But yeah, in summation, planning for progress and change is important. Everybody is a unique person. Needs change, people change, trainings change. Boy, howdy, staff change. But you need to build flexibility into your core essential components of this needs to be done immediately. We need these catalogs records changed, but you also need to account for, we acquired this collection of points that is going on display. We need them now. And everybody needs to buy into your strategy and system. Sometimes it's a conflict of hearts and minds. You need to convince your colleagues that yes, you all can use Microsoft Teams, or you can all use your digital asset management or database systems. And it isn't a one-fits-all situation, unfortunately, but communication is key. That's the one really awesome thing I found about my job, is because I work for all of the different major divisions, I can say, hey, like, do you know this person is doing the same thing that you want to do? Maybe you should touch base with them. Or this person is doing this other weird thing. Do you have some thoughts on what can be done? And you need to have your training materials and your manuals and your equipment manuals all in a known location or in a list. I am, kettle meets pot, do what I say, not what I do. But having knowledge of where those lives when something breaks spontaneously is really important to know. Yeah, and that's where I'll leave you today, with this cool picture of this child with dinosaur bones and a link to search our collections and reach out if you have questions. Yeah, so thank you guys for listening to my slightly meandering talk.
Thank you so much, Alyson. That was a great talk, and I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Um, before we jump in, just a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A feature and we will go ahead and get to them, and we'll get to as many as time allows. So we'll go ahead and jump into that if you're ready, Alyson. Excellent. Somebody asked, can you provide the gear manufacturer for the Lazy Susan auto photographs stacking software?
So for the insects, for the stacking software, we use Zareen, but you can also use, there's built-in functions within Lightroom Zarine's really nice because they kind of have a perpetual license thing, and they've been really great with us when our system crashed and we had to find our old license. They tracked it down for us and got us hooked up and ready to go. It's really great with that. And we use a stack shot that has been programmed to take steps on intervals to sort of take that vertical focus stacked image. We use we use something very similar for our xylaria or wood sections as well. For the photo stand, I'll have to check it out. I need to look again. But the reason we use the Lazy Susan that we did is because it's got programmable buttons for set intervals. So if you're doing things that are of a very similar size, you can say, all right, this is an eighth section of the circle that runs into the focus frame. How can we, let's just space it out at equal eighth intervals. So that way you can just press a button. You don't have to really change a lot of settings because that takes a lot of time. So I will have to figure out what it is and then get back to you.
And then somebody asked, do you have a plan for how often you update protocols and workflows?
Yeah, so I usually do a yearly assessment of seeing what has changed and what has been updated. I haven't been super great about that because, there lots happened in the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, usually towards the end of the academic fiscal year in June or in December, I do a reassessment and see what's been working, what's changed, what's caused me a lot of strife, what students have caused me a lot of strife, and then update things as needed. Right now, we're in a really weird transition where a lot of those 3 original cameras are starting to age out and break themselves. So we're going to have to reassess after we get our new equipment. What that allows for some new interesting depth stacking stuff that we're still trying to figure out. So at least twice a year, sometimes more often if I figure out something that has been haunting my nightmares forever and ever, which happens a lot.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Those are actually the only questions we have in the Q&A feature. If anybody else has any questions, go ahead and drop them in now. Or if anybody on our panelists have any questions as well, go ahead and jump in. I'll give it a second. Okay, I guess that was it. I will thank Alyson again. Thank you so much for giving such a great presentation. And again, reminder that this is recorded and we hope to post the recording as soon as possible, and it will be on our wiki page. So again, thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Go ahead and stop the webinar now. Thank you. Thank you again, Alyson.